Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another season and another episode of the Excellence Cartel. Today, we are joined by Dr. Emily Spickle. Oh, I didn't slaughter it. Oh, hopefully. And my good friend Aram, aka 4 weeks to the beach for everybody on the Instagram world and all the coaches listening. Jason Scoob could not join us today, but today we wanted to bring Dr. Emily on to talk about a sensory-based approach to movement and longevity. I am a fan of hers. She doesn't know this because this is where it gets fun. I go see a chiropractor here in Nashville, Tennessee called Dr. Jensen Gillette, and he is the man. And I tore my glute medius after I hairline fractured my hip the week before. I tore the glute medius 2 centimeters. So, as he's been watching me learn how to rewalk for the third time, he said, maybe you should get these socks. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He sends me his things. I swear, the first time he sent them to me, it's Naboso Technology. And I swear, I thought it was Tabasco socks, like Tabasco. And I was like, what is this? Because I'm like glancing at it for a second. And so I read it, and it's got all these like weird little tractional triangle thingies that look like little stepping on parts of Legos inside the socks. And I said, okay, I'm down for it. And I walked one day on the treadmill and I told my wife, I was like, for the weirdest thing, I could feel the part of my foot again that I haven't felt in like 3 years. And she was like, okay, so then I got your wedges. And from there, it goes into questions later. But you have changed my life. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that.
Of
Uh,
course. I
what
love I love hearing stories like that. So thank you for sharing that.
For our audience, explain what your company is and explain how you got into like feet, what led you into that journey, and then we'll get down this road.
Yeah, so I am a podiatrist, but I'm actually a functional podiatrist, which
Okay.
means I look at the feet from a very different perspective than I was taught in podiatry school. I am also a human movement specialist. So I take this deep appreciation for the feet and how it connects to the rest of the body. Our feet connect to our deep core muscles, to our diaphragm. There's also thousands of nerves on the bottom of the feet, and those nerves are designed to read every step that we take. Just a lot of people are blocking those nerves through orthotics and supportive arch supports, shoes, etc. So we're trying to access that. And then Naboso, which is my sensory-based product line, has products with little tiny pyramids. They're not Legos, but they're little pyramids that are on the release tools, the inside of our socks, insoles. We have mats, we have flooring, we have balance tools. So we have over 40 products. And just overall high level, my goal is to help people to prioritize their foot health and understand the role that the foot plays in movement and longevity, primarily from a sensory perspective.
So what does that look like to if I'm a coach, how am I trying to explain this to Mr. and Mrs. Jones why this sensory-based approach matters? Because once I read your books, can't help it, but once I tell everybody this, they're gonna hate me for it. Look at old people's shoes when they go out, you go out in public, and it's like them driving around 1970 Buicks. They are huge, they are clunky, and they shuffle the more they do it. Once you wrote about that, I was like, damn it, I cannot unsee this problem. So explain this to everybody.
Yeah. So if you think about it, when we stand, walk, move, do anything athletic, the only contact point between the body and the ground is the feet. So clearly they're quite important. But every step that we take, you are experiencing impact forces, there's irregular surfaces, you have to be quick on your feet, you have to balance. So there's a lot of information that you need to be garnering from each step that you're taking. If you put big old thick cushion supportive orthopedic or like Hoka type shoes, super maximal shoes that are very trendy right now, you are taking away all of that sensory stimulation. You are elevating the person off of the ground in their center of mass sitting higher. So it's very disconcerting for certain people. It actually contributes to falls in older individuals, but it creates a delayed or inaccurate response to the ground. And that's where I see a lot of injuries or just slower reaction times. That's important in athletics is you have to feel your feet fast so that you can react fast and just be quick change of direction or quick release of force, right? So there's many different ways that we can spin it depending on who we are trying to target.
Okay. Wrong. Do you have a question you'd like to ask or you want me to fly?
You're good. I'm taking it in and just formulating some devil's advocate points that I'm sure I'll throw out at some point.
He tore his Achilles not long ago, so I'm sure he's going to come in hot. Okay, so there's something I wanted to talk about, and you explain this so well in your book. You explain the memory of of fascia
Mhm.
and how that is. And I can tell you from my third time walking, the worst thing I did was when I tore that glute, I shrugged it off and kept walking and adjusted my gait to it. So as I am retooling and repatterning, it is a frenzy of a nightmare to get the
Yep.
nerves to shut off and all that. Can you explain to coaches why they need to learn prehab, these kind of functional way of training, and encourage clients when they get injured to stop for a second and regress?
Yes. So on the prehab side, we're actually on the fascia side. I'll kind of tie on the fascia because
Sure.
it's very, very unique and important. I take a unique approach when it comes to movement. Most movement is designed to be fascial, not muscular. And this is an important distinction. And maybe some of the coaches are like, well, how do you move without your muscles? Your muscles are, of course, what makes you move. Yes. So we got to dive a little bit deeper in it. Every group of muscle is surrounded by fascia, right? There, it's how you create organization of your muscles. In your lower leg, as an example, you have anterior compartment. You just have groups of muscles that sit on the front of your lower leg. You have a posterior compartment and you have a superficial and a deep. They're just groups of muscles surrounded by fascia. And then you take all of those muscles in a group, and each one is surrounded by more fascia. And what fascia is it's a connective tissue saran wrap spider web that interconnects every single part of your body, which is how, if you were to stand and engage your abs and then make a fist, you're like, whoa, how come I feel more energy in my core when I engage my abs and then I make a fist? Something is radiating into the center. Or if you put your tongue to your palate, something happens down here when you do that, and people can play with it and say tongue to palate. Whoa, what did I feel in my transverse abdominals when I did that, right? That's just a quick example of how every part of your body is interconnected. Okay. So all of that connective tissue has over 100 million sensory nerves. 100 million sensory nerves. So to me, with a sensory based approach to movement, that means that every movement you do, you have to be thinking about the connective tissue and the fascia. What is its role in what you're doing? It plays in a role in awareness. So, just your ability to be like, where am I? Is important. Or when you move your arm, that you know where your arm is without looking at it, right? I can look over here, move my arm, and be like, I know that my arm is at a 90-degree angle relative to my torso, right? So I know that. You know that. Aram knows that, right? But that's something that people take advantage of. They don't think of it until they get injured, right? You had an injury. Maybe some of the athletes have an injury. They tore their ACL. They got a concussion. Concussion's a huge one in athletics that affects your ability to know where you are in space. So by understanding how to prehab that from a sensory, what's the role of fascia? I'll give you a real quick one because then I know you have some questions you want to ask on it. But a quick way to tap into the fascia and these nerves I'm talking about, let's say with the arm, is to put a compressive sleeve on the arm or use kinesiology tape. And now all that you've done is you've told the brain through the fascial system and the nerves where the arm is as you're moving it. That's how I look at prehab from a sensory perspective and thinking about fascia.
Okay. Rom, what do you got with that?
I love this conversation because I'm a nerd, but and this is where like my devil's advocate side of me is going to want to kick on. 99.9% of the population is going to be blown away by all of this shit. They're going to start to step over $100 bills to pick up pennies, right? And what I mean by that, it's not to ever discredit your work, doctor, because you're a hell of a lot fucking smarter and more experienced than I'll ever be. But I'm seeing Mr. and Mrs. Jones who sit at a desk for 12 hours a day, who are 40 pounds overweight, who eat like shit, sleep like shit, stress constantly. And the last thing that they need to do is worry about the microfascia of their muscle. What they need to do is they need to learn how to fucking move properly and at all, really, because most of them don't. And that means hip flexion and extension. That means taking one step at a time and even knowing where their feet are in space and understanding what their body is even capable of, which nobody's ever taught them because nobody cares to teach them because they get thrown into a haphazard exercise program by some shithead at Orange Theory. And now they're just doing a bunch of random shit for no actual reason. So I love this conversation for coaches and trainers, but I think if the layperson ever listened to you talk, they would start to wonder why they're not losing fat because they're not wearing the right shoes. You know what I mean?
Yes. Can I share on that of where my mind goes when you're saying that is, well, it's two ways. One of the first movement methods that people who are overweight take on to lose weight is walking. They say, if I could just increase my steps, right? So then what happens is that they get, a ridiculous case of plantar fasciitis. And then they come to me as a patient and they're like, I can't do the movement, walking, that I was using to finally start to lose this weight, right? And then they're like, I can't do it because my foot, so we're here, right? So yes, that doesn't tie into this fascia thing that I was talking about, but it is a big part of my message to them and in general, where I say, okay, as you're increasing your walking, I need you to release your feet every day. I need you to realize that there are these impact forces with every time your foot strikes the ground, and it's going to be compounded because it's a direct correlation of your body weight, right? So when we strike the ground, you get 1.5 times your body weight. If you weigh 100 pounds, that's very different than 200 pounds of force going through your foot. So just what it means is you have to anticipate the load that you are putting under your feet specifically, and let's release them. Let me just teach you the basics of how to wake up your foot muscles so you could walk to start to lose the weight, right? So that may not tie to the fascia one that I just mentioned about the awareness of the body. Totally get that. But on the foot stuff, that's how I would spin it to the example that you gave. The other example of where my mind thinks has to do with postural awareness. So that's what I would give to them also is, I mean, you guys know this, is that if you do a exercise with shitty posture, you're not going to recruit the muscles the right way, right? So every muscle can only be optimized on the foundation in which it contracts. So that's where the awareness of the alignment could be, is if I'm used to sitting a certain way because of a historical sedentary lifestyle, and now I'm doing activities, I need to make sure that my coach, trainer, I don't know what they call them at Orange Theory, the person leading the class or whatever, is making sure that I'm executing those exercises with good form. Otherwise, I'm going to get hurt and then I'm back on the couch. So that's just kind of where my mind thinks on what you had said.
No,
So my
actually,
follow-up to Jeff, let me ask this because I think this is important, right? So like,
sure.
let's say you're educating a coach, doctor, because I mean, that's you're gonna have to disseminate it. They're gonna have to disseminate information somehow. And if they go directly to
Yeah.
you, it's the best source. But let's say you're educating a room full of professional trainers who are
Yeah.
working with Gen
Yeah.
Pop people. Where do you get those people started on having these conversations with their clients at the most baseline level?
Yep. So it would be kind of on that foot recovery one that I'd
Okay,
said. To me, that's the lowest hanging fruit.
okay,
It
so
is,
understanding how to get the foot
right.
prepared for walking and how to reduce impact and or prepare for impact better.
Yep. And then
Okay,
recover. Yep.
okay,
And
that
then
makes
just
sense.
saying, hey, you're not doing a heavy, crazy hit workout, which is where someone could be like, I get that I need to recover, right? Recovery post hit, you're like, I got it. Walking, because we walk as a form of locomotion from point A to point B, people don't think that they have to recover from walking. But if walking is your method for losing weight, your stress level to your system is going up. So, yes, we have to recover. Well, what's the part of the body we really got to recover the most? It's our feet. So, how do we do that in the most easiest way? And that's where I tell people release on a Neuro Ball while you brush your teeth. Like, just start there,
Yep,
right?
I'm with you there. That's I think the basics are just so important. And the problem, I think that we always love to go high level, right? Like every coach and every practitioner,
Yeah.
to us, this is normal shit.
Yeah.
To the layperson who's consuming bullshit content on the internet, they're not going to look at any of this stuff because this is way over their head. So if you start telling them about this kind of stuff, it might actually scare them away from doing anything. And they're going to just immediately go buy flat shoes that they're not ready for
Yeah.
because they have dog shit hip mechanics and they've been walking everted their whole life and they've worn out the outside of their shoes. As somebody who's torn their Achilles, I immediately noticed that on my left side where the Achilles tear was, I was everted on my left side. What did that create? Tight left hip flexor, tight right QL, tight right piriformis, and now this is what's happening. But I'm a trainer. I know that stuff. I know how to correct it. 99% of the population won't ever be able to do that, or they're not even going to get guided the proper way because their trainers aren't equipped with this information. So I think this is brilliant stuff for coaches and trainers to learn because we have to start at the ground up as coaches because we have to simplify this stuff so radically to the general population.
Yep.
I
So we
was
get it.
gonna laugh because when she was talking about the steps, and I was like, well, ever since the 10,000 step research came out, it's not nothing to see gym pop people coming to me with 10, 12, 15, 20,000 steps a day, knee, hip issues. And then, I do in-person training. That's because I own a gym. So half my clientele I see. So I get to do like the Neuro Ball, which we'll talk in a second about. But I would never, probably as a coach, I'm first honest about this stuff. The space that we're in, we're paid for performance. That performance is how people's transformations look, which doesn't always lead to the best results in other areas. That's just what the industry is right now. If
Yeah.
I did not go through my hip injury and kind of sort my way through and get down to my foot and go, huh, okay, why is this? It looks, yeah, it does look stupid. Why is it suddenly look stupid? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But because I worked that, I was able to take this stuff, and this is where I tell coaches there is a lot of low hanging fruit, which we could get into. Big toe lifts, wearing a toe splay. Like she has one I wear in my shoes at work that allow me to stand on concrete like it's nobody's business because I can properly stand on my glutes. But there's one thing she talked about, which I really want to talk about on this one, the Neuro Ball. So what this is a ball, and you have to you can crack it open and there's like a little nugget on the inside of it that really wrecks a certain part, which I'll later get into it. But there is 5 points, okay? And I have done this with clients, but before I talk about anything, I do it myself. And Aram, I do this before I walk. And for I have a 1 inch difference, I have to work between my legs. I walk on a lift. Okay, my left glute med's kind of shot. But since I started using this, I am warmer, quicker walking than I was before. And I mean, like, it would take me 15 minutes in before I felt good. And now I'm about 3 minutes in before I'm like gliding,
Nice.
locomotion's moving. So there is something to it. So explain this to our audience and Ram, what this beautiful neuroball is, the 5 points to it, and kind of the brilliance of what it does.
Yeah. So, and this would be the example that I was telling through a Rom's question for foot recovery. So the Neuro Ball and all of the Naboso products, I'll show this is one. There's little tiny pyramids on all of them. Those little pyramids are stimulating a very specific nerve in the bottom of the feet. And this is where, again, the person from couch to 5K or however you want to associate them is they don't have to understand what we're going into, right? Totally, totally fine. But these tiny little pyramids, which stimulate a very specific nerve on the feet, happens to be the braille nerve. So next time you go to an ATM, look at the braille dots, put your finger on them. It's on every ATM. And you'll see, I just pushed on the Naboso ball. It leaves these things that I'm like, huh, that kind of looks like braille. Same nerve as in your feet. Okay. We stimulate it. We're like, slapping it awake to make it efficient for you, for everyone. Okay. When you stimulate those nerves, you build an awareness. So you're just like, huh, where are my feet? Oh, there's my feet, right? A lot of people just have no connection to their feet. It also wakes up the 26 muscles in the bottom of each foot. They're small muscles, kind of like your pelvic floor, your transverse abdominals, right? They're just deep muscles that again, the couch to 5K, they don't need to know the name of them. That's fine. But there are 26 muscles on the bottom of the feet that have to play a role in balance, posture, and movement, which translates to just feeling an ease of walking, more stable, or more into the hips or something, right? Something along that lines. And then it also stimulates circulation. And the circulation is part of recovery, right? You think of Normatec. This is where I give analogies where people might be like, yeah, what are those funny little boots that everyone is on and those reset centers? And all it's doing is circulation for recovery. Okay, so you build all of that into a ball that then splits into two pieces, and you stand on the two pieces. There's 5 different points, 20 seconds per point. And that this come with videos, but there's 5 points on the bottom of the foot. You literally just stand there for 20 seconds while brushing your teeth is what we tell people to do. Okay, go to the next point, next point, next point, next point. Boom. If that's all you do, and that takes 2 minutes, that to me, that is solid, right? Then at the end of the day, when you got to brush your teeth again, you do the same 5 points, 2 minutes. So now you are waking up and you're recovering at the end of the day. So you're starting the day and ending the day with a little bit of foot something, something. And then before people lift, move, run, do Pilates, hit the court, hit the field, whatever it is, right? Then they would do that same thing to essentially wake up their foot. That's the lowest hanging fruit. Then there's many, many things we can add on top of that.
And you're hoping that people brush their teeth twice a day.
Well, that would be a whole other
Oh, Rom, I got something wild to tell you. My mother-in-law is 70. Okay, she came over, which leads me to my next point. I want to talk about your Naboso wedges.
Yes.
Okay. I use these before played with them a lot. And you can set them up, and I'll let her talk about this, but you can use a kettlebell weight and you can start getting yourself to get internal rotation. Okay, back driven back in your hip. Okay. So my mother-in-law, bless her, she can only work 4 hours at a time at Public. She loves this job, but she was fading to 3. I had her come over and she walked like I was like, there's no way you pass the sobriety test. Don't ever get pulled over in Mount Juliet. So we go and I work with her for about 30 minutes with the wedges and the Neuro Ball. I bought her Neuro Ball and now she works 5-hour shifts. So, and she's happier. So explain the technology of these wedges and what that's doing when you're trying to fix internal, like it's a whole nother game over there too.
Yes, yes. What I would say for that to help people to appreciate this, so those are the wedges, yes. But if the listeners want to entertain me and stand up and move their feet, and this is how I would have the person on the couch if I was explaining it. I have the luck of having treated patients who are exactly who you're talking about, and I have to get them to just be like, that's it. If they're like, is the first step, solid. That's what we want, right? But so the listeners want to stand up, and as you're standing with your feet shoulder width apart, I want you to exaggerate and roll to the outside of your foot, just like whatever that means to you, right? You're just doing this, and then roll to the inside of the foot. And then just do that a couple times. And every time you do that, I want the listeners to feel or look down and be like, you know what? My leg is rotating, right? My leg rolls in. Oh, my knees are knocking, right? So there's this influence of your foot position all the way up your leg to your knees to your hips. Even if you put your hands on your pelvis, you should feel your pelvis is doing this, right? It's this fascinatingly interconnected complex, right? And every movement of the foot. So the wedges are a way to essentially shift the foot skeletally into slightly different positions, which creates different rotations in the leg or movements in the leg, which then allows a little bit more stacked posture. Okay. The wedges are also covered in the same texture. So we're waking up the nerves. That's a bonus on top of them. But the way that we use the wedges with coaches, as an example, or with clients, is that let's say you're doing squats and you want to do it barefoot or from the ground up, but you have very flat feet, or you have limited ankle dorsiflexion. So this is where someone who has an Achilles tendon injury, I'd probably use them also, is that you can just slightly manipulate the foot to then manipulate the lower leg into the pelvis, and you just get more activation of the muscles that we need. The wedges are essentially mimicking orthotics. Not that they're taking the place of orthotics and not that they are doing negative things like sometimes people talk about orthotics, but it's simply playing with biomechanics. That's all that we're doing with them, right? So that's how we would use those in a certain setting. You can also flip them around. I feel like the coaches may be familiar with squat blocks. Squat blocks are kind of trendy right now.
Right.
So think of that. That's all that one of the ones that you had shown, Jeff, can be turned around. It's a 25-degree wedge. That could be used as a squat block, which, well, what's the benefit of a squat block? You can essentially bypass ankle mobility. You can get deeper into the squat. You create more loading, pre-tension on the muscle fibers before you do the positive phase. So that's where some people may think of wedges also.
Yeah, I think this is where the responsibility of the coach now is to educate their clients to the importance of this stuff. Because here's the thing, right? Like, let's say if you're a personal trainer that's listening to this and you're charging, I don't know, what's a personal trainer charge in Tennessee? I don't even know, Jeff. What do you charge
For online, I'm three.
no, in person for an hour
Four.
session?
For an hour session, well, I'm small group training, but one-on-one, because I have one client, I'm 150.
Okay, so like let's say we're charging 150, which is when I was in Connecticut, that's about what I was charging. Our clients want A to B as fast as humanly possible. And you start talking to them about their ankle mobility and all this other shit, you've lost that individual in the first 10 minutes. So this is where like dripping this stuff into a workout and challenging them in different ways by not actually hammering them with too much science and being able to give them some immediate relief to a problem is wildly important. And I think where you can come in, Doc, is you educate coaches on how to implement this stuff into a workout and how to use these tools to their advantage. And now you're essentially giving the client what they need while giving them what they want without boring them to tears and then having to be able to actually earn that $150 as opposed to having that person be sprinting out of there, ripping their hair out. Because this is what used to happen at Equinox. We had tier 4 trainers at Equinox who would do like all these rolling patterns and you have to start from the ground up because you can't move at all. And these rich ass people are paying $185 an hour and they were excited to go get a workout in, and now they're laying on the fucking ground for 45 minutes wondering why. And it's because they never communicated the importance of movement patterning and preparation and all this other stuff. They just threw them on the ground and said, this is how you have to do it.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hey, I know that you have limited ankle mobility. To fix that problem temporarily to get you into a deeper squat to feel your glutes, we could put you on a heel wedge and now your feet in a better position to have better hip mechanics. Boom, in 10 seconds, you've gotten that person to work out the way you want them to, and they're also getting some positive feedback physically. So now both people win.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen in the 20 years of doing fitness that you do have the trainers that then do the most trendy thing. And there was a trendy moment when rolling patterns and some of I mean, DNS is still very valid, but some of those methods dribbled into fitness. And then you get the trainers who want to do it. But again, you have to match what the client wants, right? And if the client is like, hey, I'm a busy executive and I only have this many times to do it, I need to hit the muscles heavy. So how do we get right? So I totally get that. That just takes a little bit of experience. And I mean, it will always be a side of the fitness that there's something trendy and people want to do the trendy. But yes, so the wedges could be a way to just kind of sneak it in there. It doesn't even have to be like a heavy explanation, but you're like, hey, we're just going to do this when we're hitting the weights heavy anyway, right? Because I want you to hit your glutes harder, right? If you have pancake feet, you're just not going to be able to load your glutes as heavy. That's it, right? They don't need to understand the internal rotation and what's happening, right? But I'm just going to get you in a little bit better position through this little like you're kind of like a MacGyver doing it. And then it hits the muscles. And then, yes, they're worth $150 an hour.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I actually, I agree with what Rom says. I agree with what you say. There's got to be a thin middle because we all know that you have to get people either active and the calories all locked in. And it's either you kind of starve them or you step them. And if, they're really overweight, the feet get broken. This is why I wanted coaches to know, be like, hey, you kind of got a couple pathways, but if you're going to exploit the step one, let's have this conversation, which leads me to short foot exercise and using the wedges for this with the big toe. I tell my
Yep.
clients it's like creating a suspension, a cross bridge, a drawbridge.
Yep.
Explain this and the importance of why you would want to work on building an arch muscle and how that's beneficial and why a coach would want to do that, but most importantly, a person just for everyday walking would want to know.
Yeah. So the strength of your foot is in your toes. That is very important, which means if you want to squat from the ground up, you technically want to balance the right way, push off all the stuff from dynamic movement. You even want to do a bicep curl the right way when you're standing. You have to activate your foundation, your feet, which is in your toes. That is very, very important. And this exercise you could also do in your shoes. So you don't have to be barefoot in it. You could be in your socks. But you want to think about the action of your toes, which activates your foot, but also your core. And you are only as strong as your core is stable. That is a foundational principle is you want strong glutes, you got to get a strong core first, right? So the action is short foot, which is engaging your toes. Now, the way that I actually teach short foot now is a little bit different. And I do it through what's called a forward lean, just to first get the action. So if the listeners want to stand up and join me, I'm just going to kind of cue it. But you would stand with your feet shoulder width apart, lift your toes, spread them out as wide as you can, place them back down on the floor, stand nice and tall. Imagine that you're as stiff as a board. And while staying stiff as a board, I want you to slightly lean your body forward and then bring it back vertical. And then slightly lean and bring it vertical. And you're going to do that a couple times. And every time that the listeners do it, I want them to notice what happens to their toes. Do they notice that every time they lean forward, boom, the toes anchor or grip into the ground? And when that happens, just be aware of that sensation. Okay, now stand nice and tall, no more leaning. Can you activate your toes in the same way that happened when you leaned forward, but you're not leaning, right? That action, that's short foot. Okay, now I teach short foot 1 foot at a time. Can you just literally stand there, spread your toes, and push your toes into the floor? When you do that, if you look at your foot while pushing your toes into the floor, you should see your arch start to lift. When your arch lifts, that means your foot became stable. Now, to go into deeper exercises is to connect your feet to your core. Every time you push your toes down, you would want to exhale. That's all that you do, right? So toes down, shh, right? Okay. So now let's imagine we're doing an exercise, right? I'm going to spin this for Aram because I know he's going to ask the question about how do you get this visually for your clients is that every time you push out of the squat, you're going to push your toes down as you are pushing out of the squat, and you are going to exhale. I believe that, every trainer, even for the person who's trying to lose 100 pounds, they're cueing breath somewhere. You're telling Jane or John or whoever, right? Exhale when you come out of, stop holding your breath. Exhale every time you lift the weight. Exhale every time you push out of the squat. You do the dead, whatever. That is like fitness 101, right? Actually, no, that's being a human 101. It's being alive, you got to breathe, right? And it's understanding where to breathe, right? We breathe where we are putting the load, and you have to be the most stable. I know you guys know this, right? But you're thinking, okay, as I come out of the deadlift, I'm about to lift that weight through my lumbar spine. Okay, I gotta exhale as I come up. So I activate here so that I protect my lower back. Well, all I'm going to do is say, push your toes down as you are exhaling and lifting out, which means you're actually activating these fascial stabilization pathways. Very, very easy to do. And if I was training Jane to lose 100 pounds, I would have her do this on every squat and do every bicep curl because you just get more activation, right? And we know that to get results, you have to recruit more muscle fibers. That's part of the name of the game. It's just like how much muscle fibers are we recruiting, right? I try to use these little tricks, such as pushing your toes down, lift your pelvic floor, exhale, put your tongue to your pellet. If you're going to hold the dumbbell, like hold the dumbbell, like wrap your 5 and 4 fingers around the dumbbell because that activates these fascial slings. So you just get a little bit more muscle recruitment when you're doing it. So that's how I would coordinate short foot into an exercise.
Beautifully said, because until I had this injury and I had to really read about releasing my psoas, I didn't understand touching my left molar and doing various things and how that relates. So when you say some of this stuff, people are going, huh? And I'm like, I swear it's way better cues, and people can like habitually, because it's a movement that they feel contact, like tongue to palate, they'll be able to remember that cue.
Yeah.
With that being said, I want to kind of go. This is I got the final few in there, Rom. I know you probably have one in there too, but I wanted to kind of get into the vestibular system and vestibular rehab and kind of like what that is. Like it looks wild. It was, when I read your book, it was the first time I'd ever read that. And I had to get on Google and I'll be honest, Emily, I smoked a bowl and I went down a rabbit hole with that one. And I was like watching videos and I was like, oh my God. So explain this to our audience, what all this is and kind of like why all this matters before the next question I got.
Yes, yes. So let me, because I have like a Rom sitting right here who I know. I
You
love
got
a Rom's
your hand,
question.
man, right out of the gate.
I'm just, my problem is like, I love all this shit because we're thinking about it at such a higher level. But
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
Like
like
a
it,
realist.
like
Yep.
I was, the best advice I was ever taught as a coach or as a trainer was stop building watches for people and just tell them what fucking time it is.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I mean? So for
yeah,
me, like I think our job as science communicators or science disseminators is to make it so fucking easy for people to
Agreed.
understand and so low friction that they just keep showing up to do it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
by default, they just get better at it. So I think that's where I think you come in because you do a great job of simplifying it.
yeah, yeah. So I totally get it. And that is where I truly do believe that as science communicators, we have to deliver the relevant information and in a way that, right? So you don't want them to be like, and then just frozen, right? So I will share this and then filter in kind of the perspective of a ROM in it. But so the vestibular system is your ears. And when we think about movement and our sensory systems in the beginning, Jeff, you had mentioned a little bit about like sensory stacking, sensory conflict, like just what is that?
Where we
For
go next.
yeah. For the listeners, the way that we stand up in gravity, this is not even like, doing a backflip on a balance beam, meaning like complicated stuff. The way that you just literally stand on your 2 feet in gravity is an interplay of four systems. They're sensory systems, but four systems: your eyes, your ears, your joints, and then your skin. That is literally how you just stand up on your 2 feet, right? So any of your clients who are older, maybe they're younger and they had a concussion, they had a stroke, they have MS, Parkinson's, neuropathy, any sort of anything, deviation of here, you've disrupted these four systems. So the person is not as stable on their feet, right? Look at, I mean, we're all kind of an age where you're like, look at your parents and the way that they're starting to move or their friend, right? Things slow down. Okay. So your vestibular system are your ears. And in the ears, there is your fluid, and that's how you just maintain your head, right? In balance. Okay. One thing that I will tie into the ears that might be cool for the listeners is that your ears, when it comes to movement and balance and the coordination of movement, is also very sensitive to rhythm, sound. So by using music or a metronome, but by using music and moving to the rhythm of the music and the timing, and you're like, every time you hear that beat, I want you to step, right? Your body naturally, your nervous system naturally falls into coordination. So this is something very important for athletes and for older individuals and children, is to find the rhythm of things. But actually it's important for everyone. The vestibular system, how you do very simple vestibular perturbations or stimulus, is things like just shaking your head no, nodding your head yes. Could you like turn? Sure. Could you invert? Sure. But you're essentially trying to disrupt the normal balance so that when someone is disrupted, they know how to anticipate and respond to it. That's really what conflict training is. think with like an athlete, right? If you kept an athlete in a bubble, a super safe bubble, and then you put them on the football field against opponents, like they're screwed. You're essentially trying to throw everything at the athlete so they know how to respond. Kind of like the military. Why the military does all of these different kind of mock things is so that when they get there, they understand how to anticipate. It's the nervous system. When I lived in New York, I dated for 3 years a FBI SWAT sniper. So he was like, they go through mock missions and extractions over and over and over and over so that their nervous system is like, I've been here before. That is what an athlete does as well. That's what a dancer does. So when they're performing, they're just in the subconscious. That's essentially what we need to do here. Now I know, Aram, you're probably like, Jane on the couch doesn't care. Doesn't care, but it's how do you weave it in a way where it would just be like, one of the easiest ways is part of her movement prep, do a freaking down dog. And you've just thrown her vestibular system in a position that it's not in when she's sitting on the couch. I love inverting, and you have to be able to invert or turn to throw off your vestibular system. And most people are very safe and they never turn. So when they're about to step off of a curb, they're like, what? And then the vestibular system's like, what the hell? Never been there before. And then they fall partly because also the vestibular system is thrown off. So threw a lot at you guys.
No,
I
see, the
tested how
reason
you.
I'm saying all this is because you're about to see an explosion, I think, in the next few years. People are getting more wise to how unhealthy things are. And it's an aging population that coaches are going to encounter. And they're
Mhm.
going to be encountering people who, if you blow on them, they fall over. And they tend to be frail, especially with the heavy use of GLP-1s, which came out showing 35% weight of the, or basically 3.5 pounds for every 10 is muscle. Like if they don't work out and protein, I've got, yeah, I'll share it with you on it. But it's basically 35%. So you're gonna have all these different things, and people don't think about that. Like I had to go through that where they basically laid me down on a table and suddenly grabbed me and twisted me and got my nervous system to allow me to go, because where I had hurt my hip and I had the low back break because I have spondylolisthesis, a grade 1 slip, my nervous system locked me dead center to the point my adductors locked on me.
Yep.
So if I went to go shift left to right, I could almost fall over, which with the brittle bone disease isn't a good day. So I had to go through the vestibular training, and it really helped me. And
Mhm.
this is, I want coaches to know this. You cannot be a one size fits all coach. And I have learned that a lot. Like you can basically help people out with their feet, which was the point today. I wanted to draw to people and with the big toe, all these different things. And it's our job, like Ram says, to disseminate it. But I do have one little question for you before Ram takes over and we can hear his beautiful line of thought. Because I love it when Ram, I love you because you think way different than me. Um, why are orthotics and insoles a bad thing? Because we're seeing it all the time. Fleet feet. These people come in like, now you got me doing 8,000 steps. I went to Feet Fleet and they told me I'm all da 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 da. And I'm like, oh shit. You know what I mean? So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So I would say arch supports and orthotics there's an appropriate time and place for them, meaning there's an appropriate foot type, injury history, or activity where maybe someone would utilize them. And that's actually how I decide footwear recommendations and the need for orthotics is I ask those three questions. What is your foot type? What is your injury history? And what are the activities you're going to do it on? Meaning, if you have a very flat foot with a history of plantar fasciitis and Achilles tendonitis, or just like arch pain, if you're like, don't even go into these names, arch pain, heel pain, and you want to run a 5K or a marathon. Well, I probably would say you need a little bit of support because of these three factors. If you say, I got neutral foot, never had arch pain, heel pain, none of that. Feet are solid. And I want to run a marathon or go do, CrossFit or the High Rocks or whatever the new ones are, right? Go ahead because you've checked the boxes. You do not need our support. You can be in minimal shoes. You got it, right? So that's how I try to kind of differentiate it. Now, I have lots of information on the internet. I have lectures about different types of flat feet and the appropriateness of using arch supports for certain flat feet. And some flat feet are flat because they are weak. Some flat feet are flat because they have a laxity in the ligaments, which means you can't build the strength around the ligament, right? So imagine someone like a contortionist. Imagine someone who's very loosey-goosey, right? They could do all these crazy things, right? Their ligaments are too stretchy, which means when someone has very stretchy ligaments and they stand in gravity, they kind of fall into the ligaments, right? So they can move into those positions and try to build strength, but you can't replace a loosey-goosey ligament. Like that's like a foundational principle is strength doesn't replace ligament, if that makes sense. So that's where orthotics might come into play. Now, are orthotics and supportive shoes and arch supports over prescribed or over recommended? Absolutely, because it's something to sell. Like, how do I sell? I can't sell strengthening your own feet by themselves, right? That's not how my business makes money that way, but other businesses don't make money that way. So I think that's the important part of it, right? Is we have to understand that. If I can just add real quick as far as like footwear, because some of the people might be thinking about that. Footwear is partly function. You got basketball shoes, but footwear is still fashion. And you have to factor that in. And there's trends in footwear, right? Remember the Yeezy, so ugly, but the Yeezy slides, and like there's some things that are just so ugly but they're trends, and there'll always be trends. Like Crocs were a trend, Uggs were a trend, you had Toms were a trend, right? And so that's part of the footwear. Then there's the like natural. Right now it's trendy to have maximal footwear like Hoka's and just these super stacked, right? Just kind of get it. It's fashion, right? You can't fight fashion, right? Just let the fashion trend ride and then understand the time and place of footwear in a gym setting or an exercise setting, a fitness, right? And what's appropriate there might be very different than what the 20-year-old is wearing to college because they want to be trendy. Got it. Right. That's kind of how I look at those different topics.
100%, because most people don't understand the shoe difference for having it for a treadmill versus for working out on the gym floor versus even leg day, the differences you might want. So that was really well said, because a lot of coaches new to the space, they're under a lot of pressure always to get results. But that's something that if the client can't keep up with what you're prescribing and it goes back to footwear, you're going to feel like a dumbass for not knowing that one.
Yeah.
Aram, what have you got that you want to kind of close this up with? Because I got one final one to wrap us up before I let Dr. E spill where everybody can go throw her money.
I think the conversation around appropriate footwear for appropriate situation is wildly important. I mean, like I'm not going to wear my flat lifting shoes when I go run for 25 minutes because it's just going to destroy me. And vice versa, I'm not going to wear my running shoes squatting because I want to be able to feel the ground force production and I want to be able to drive my toes into the ground and I want to be able to actually feel the floor underneath my feet. But again, like most of our clients are rushing from the office to the gym. They're not decompressing, they're not foam rolling, they're not stretching. They're spending 10 minutes on a treadmill to warm up their body. And then they're jumping into an
If they're
exercise. And it's
lucky, if
if
they're
they're
lucky.
lucky. Yeah. And again, our responsibility as coaches is to be able to explain to them the importance of some type of preparation for movement. Like I stand at my desk all day, and even knowing that, I've put a rubber mat underneath my feet because I noticed after a while, I can start to shift my weight into my left hip or I can start to shift into my right, and I'm never neutral. And like we have awareness of this stuff because we know about it. So once you know it, you can't unknow it. So I know because of my Achilles tear that I tend to evert. So I try to actually put more weight on the inside of my left foot to be able to straighten out my left hip. But your average person is not going to be thinking about these things because they have 3 kids and 7 jobs and they're poorly rested and they're highly stressed and they're just like, I just need to get to this place of fat loss so I can start to feel better and move better. So as long as we could just drip this stuff on them very easily, very practically, hey, if you're going to squat and you're not going to run that day, wear a flatter shoe. If you're going to run and you need a little more support and we need to put a band-aid on your problem because we know that you're not going to do anything meaningful to actually mobilize yourself, then sure, wear the orthotic, do your 5K run and call it a day. But at some point, address the root cause of your issues so that they don't remain issues or that you can get yourself out of them at some point.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that is exactly how I would have said that as well, is right. How do you guide them in the easiest way so that they can come in with the appropriate footwear based off of what the workout is, right? And and then just having the understanding to see that if someone is in running shoes and you're doing something that requires more stability, to then guide them on that, right? Running shoes are designed for running, not for box jumps, right? Things like that. And just having them understand that in a very simple way. I'm also very understanding that not everyone can own 5 pairs of shoes for the gym, right? So I try to be very sensitive and say, okay, like this is ideal. That this is how I explain as a physician. I just say, this is ideal. I understand that, 5 pairs of shoes is whatever. I don't know how much that costs, $1,500 or something like that. And say, but if you could only get one, this will check most of the boxes, right? If you were to get two, okay, here, right? And you kind of guide them in that way and say, this is going to be the one that checks most boxes so that they just get that, right? And they don't even explain why. You have to be, well, look at the counter of this and the flat, and there's no toe rocker, and they don't care about they don't care about that. But you understand how to guide them and identify where there's the gaps in knowledge, and you just plug it in.
I have a, I have a question because I could literally ask so many. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I have so many pages that I thumb down just with highlights. What's been the hardest part of entrepreneurship with getting Naboso technology out there for people to understand this awareness? Because it is the least sexiest thing because nobody thinks of it until they have a problem. It's a lot like a dude with prostate. We don't think about it until we're over 40. We have to think about it. And you know what I mean? So, like, what's been the hardest part? I'm curious on this one.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for over a decade now,
Oh,
and it is very much of a hill like this. Actually, no, maybe it's like this.
the
The
steepest one
vertical,
ever.
this, right? Like what angle of incline do I want on it? But selling a product such as Naboso for foot health and movement health, I have to first sell foot health before I can sell a product, right? So that's been the limiting factor. So I'm fighting against uh, mass media footwear companies. So like the message that the podiatry community even puts out. I've been taught through podiatry school to recommend arch support surgery, supportive shoes, dot, dot, dot. Then you have Nike, Saucony, Hoka, like you're fighting then all these major multi-million dollar companies about the message they are translating or putting out there. So that's been the climb. I was just on a business meeting yesterday with a chiropractor, and she's like, I presented and I mentioned Naboso, and like all these docs didn't know Naboso. And she was just like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why is that? And I was like, because if they don't have an awareness of the feet or they weren't taught to think of feet first through their school, which they're not, fitness,
No, faded. We had a hang. We had a hang. Oh,
all allied health and wellness, Vivo Barefoot, Zero Shoes, Lambs, any of these minimal shoe brands, when you're in the space, you feel like everyone's wearing them because you're in the space. But if you actually look at the numbers, the whole footwear industry, the minimal shoe space is like this. The number of minimal shoes that are sold every year is like a little blip. Vivo Barefoot does over 100 million a year in sales. So you would think they sell over 1 million pairs of shoes every year. Then you have zero shoes. You have all these other ones. And even with that, it's this little blip. So it is probably not unusual for either of you to meet someone and be like, yeah, minimal shoes. And they're like, huh? What? Still. So imagine try, right? So if they haven't, they're doing 100 million in sales. I wish Naboso was doing 100 million in sales. We're not doing 100 million in sales. I wish, right? One day. But if
Yes.
they're doing that and you still have people who are like, minimal what? No, I've never heard of Vivo. Imagine trying to like, so it's such a steep hill, but that's where having partnerships and going on platforms such as this. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak and share about it. Just opens a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and in due time, it will become bigger.
I agree.
Raising,
Um,
raising awareness.
Yep.
yes. Do you have a mentorship? Any courses coaches can take underneath you? Anything like that to further enhance their knowledge? Do you do seminars? Like, throw it out there real quick, Doc.
Yes. So in addition to Naboso, I own an education company for health and fitness professionals. It's called EBFA Global. We have online certifications. I have a barefoot training specialist. I have a foot posture specialist, neurosensory specialist, pelvic floor, all of these. And then I have, in addition to that, a lot of 1 hour webinars. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. On my YouTube channel, I have hundreds of videos over the last decade teaching about feet very specifically for the health and fitness professional, where I'm talking about it in a way saying, I've been a trainer, I did group X, I've been a fitness professional for now I don't train clients anymore. I see patients, but that's where my career started. So I understand the lens at which you're looking at, which is why when a Ram talks about these very specific clients, I'm like, I get it. I've trained them before, right? And it's hard to navigate when you have a specific kind of need at that forefront. So I have courses on that. I have the YouTube channel. I have the books, which I had shared with you. I speak at a lot of conferences around the US and around the world around fitness and health and trying to get people to prioritize the feet. So, yes, there's a lot of content out there to definitely dive into.
Beautiful. Where can everyone give you a follow and all that? And if you could get your assistant to give me all the links to everything, and I will gladly put in the show notes so everyone can easily find you at this point.
Yes, absolutely. So my website is the same as my Instagram handle, which is the functional foot doc. The functional foot doc. So the website, thefunctionalfootdoc.com. I see patients virtually. So that's important. So if people, I don't care where you are in the world, you can see me virtually or in person in Arizona. Naboso is naboso.com, Naboso. And then we have an Instagram handle, Naboso Technology. And then my education site is ebfaglobal.com. And then everything kind of spider webs.
Awesome. Well, Ron, thank you for joining me today with this. Dr.
No, thank
Emily,
you. Thank you,
thank
Doc. I
you
appreciate
for
it.
joining me. Coaches, I'm going to tell you one thing. All you got to do is get a video of your client walking, and you could change their life. So I encourage you to go do these courses. I spent literally lots of hours scouring her YouTube, all reading her books. The stuff is golden. And if you know how to apply it, you're going to change a lot of people's lives. And guess what? The gym pop, if you get them to feel better, that's a referral train. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Ciao.